One. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to have Sheila V with us here today. She's an author and psychic medium, and thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rachel Angelica. I love connecting with my North American community, and you ladies are such soulful ladies.
And we love listening to your accent. I'm excited to listen to it for a full hour, so this will be fantastic. And the first question that we love to ask all of our guests was, when is the first time that you ever felt something on the spiritual or the soul level in your life?
For me, it was in my childhood, and a lot of the clients and students I teach, we have these experiences in our childhood and then we shut them down and forget about it. So more formal experiences happen later in life. So for me, I remember as a very young child, at the age of 3 years old, seeing spirit for the first time and feeling inconsolable. And I remember crying. And the reason why I remember that memory is because both my parents held my hand and walked me around the house. And they've never both held my hand at the same time. That's why I thought it was really odd. So I definitely saw spirit. When I was 12 years old, I had sort of my first bout of depression. And I remember wanting to leave and starting to connect to the other side. And I feel like as children, when we have spiritual experiences as young children, we don't realize it's spiritual. We just think it's normal, and it is normal. And then, so they're my first sort of two times when I connected to the other side. And then I had my awakening sort of 8-9 years ago in a workshop where I could see, sense, feel, and perceive spirits around me and around people I was reading for. And it was like all of these years, these timelines collapsed into that one moment. And I was like, I've arrived. I'm meant to do this kind of work, being a medium. So yeah, definitely as a young child.
Yeah. And is there anyone in your family who had this gift before you, or are you the first that you know of and have used it?
No, it absolutely runs through the family line. And so often it does when I read for clients. It might skip a generation, so it gets a bit confusing. You think, oh, no one has the gifts. However, I'll feel a relative come through saying they have the gifts. So I have an unusual family. My parents had an arranged marriage, Sri Lankan by origin. And so my dad is now a retired doctor, and he had arranged marriage to my mother. And my mother's very psychic with many of the intuitive gifts that I inherited. And so they had an arranged marriage and produced a woman like me, who I was a corporate executive. I was a finance director. And then I also had these psychic mediumship gifts. And I think a lot of women these days, and men, are having awakenings in their corporate jobs and not sort of understanding where it comes from. So my mother and my grandmother and my cousins, we have the gifts and abilities, I call it, because you can develop them into really to help transform people's lives. And in my childhood, my mother would speak about our dreams. So she would have premonitions in her dreams. And we would wake up in the morning and we'd say, what did you dream of? And even now with my partner, when we wake up, I said, what did you dream? So from my childhood, very young age, it was really common for us to speak privately in the family about the mystical.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so curious to hear, what was that transition like from the finance world into mediumship?
Look, it was challenging, I think in this day and age, and post-COVID, so many people have had spiritual awakenings in the last 2 years. So it's not that weird to meditate and to read spiritual books or to say you're going through an awakening. Like, people get it. When I had my awakening all those years ago, I felt really lost and confused. I still think you feel lost and confused. Right. I felt really lost and confused. And I was thinking, oh my God, what do I do? I'm meant to do this spiritual work. I'm meant to be a healer. This is my life purpose. Yet I have this career where that I earn a lot of money in, and there's a lot of status, and I've done an MBA, and I'm meant to like climb this corporate ladder. And so in my book, Brave, I talk about, what is purpose? And quite often when I mentor women, I say, don't make any sudden changes. Like, you are probably going to do your soul work alongside your other job in your life for a while, because it takes a while to figure out how to navigate both worlds until you properly blend them. And then you make the next big transition. So when I first had my awakening, there's several things that I struggled with, which some of your listeners might, is I didn't want to tell anyone because I thought people would think, I was weird. And in the first chapter of my book, Brave, I talk about how, and even people from that time that knew me in the corporate world, they say, we didn't know this about you, Sheila, because I kept it very secret. So you might be fearful to talk about this with people. I was, and I didn't want anyone to think I was weird or lose credibility. And my reply to that is, yes, speak up about it. The second thing is I wasn't sure, like, I feel like as psychic women, we know our bigger dharma. And I got really overwhelmed that I had to leave my job and write a book and start this business. And I had a feeling and a knowing, my clear cognizant was like, I know I'm going to do this. And I got really overwhelmed. So I found a spiritual teacher and a mentor really fast to help me navigate. Just start doing readings, just start doing the psychic fairs. She got me on psychic TV. Like, it was a lot of baby steps, many baby steps. And so in the corporate world, I was overwhelmed because I was thinking, how do you do this new job in this new career? And at the same time, Barry, the third big thing was, how do I tell my family? Because, we'll do anything to belong and to not be abandoned by our family. And that means selling out on our own dreams. The thing is, when you have your psychic awakening, a spiritual awakening, I feel like it's one big time in your life where you stop selling out and you start to honor yourself. And that can be quite difficult because you might feel alone, because you might need to take a break from your family or from your friends or from whoever the group you're spending time with. Your drinking buddies, you might not want to drink as much. And you might find yourself alone. And in one of my chapters in my book, I talk about soul tribes, and you need to find your tribe. You have to find your people. And they're probably going to be new people. And so when I was in the corporate world, I was like, I need new people. So I became friends with all these like psychic mediums. Back then, we didn't have podcasts, and, Zoom wasn't a big thing. So I used to drive an hour once a week and sit in my development circle. And we used to do all kind of witchy psychic things together. And I loved it. Some of these ladies are still my good friends because of what we went through when we all had our corporate jobs.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that so many people, like you said, are coming to this awakening now. And there's also the birth of a lot of new businesses. So people kind of having that awakening and then making that leap. I'm really curious, in the future, you see more of the spirituality being intertwined just in the corporate world. I know I've heard you before talk about you had like crystals on your desk and like you're sort of bringing that in slowly. Or do you think that this is going to give rise to entrepreneurship and people really finding their dharma through their own businesses and through smaller business? Like, how do you see it playing out?
I see it playing out in so many different ways. That's a really great question, Rachel, and really great insight. I see a lot of women having side hustles, and I wouldn't call it a side hustle, like a business where you're working your life, where you're serving through your gifts. And to the women out there, if you're listening, if you don't do it, it's going to niggle at you forever. So just find a mentor, a coach, a teacher. I teach this myself. Find your group and just start taking the baby steps to start serving. We have delusions of it looking a certain way, a fantasy, sometimes of being famous or reaching a load of people. If you take care of your little group you're serving, that group will get bigger and bigger and bigger, because you need to power up. You need to strengthen, your own auric field as a light worker. If not, you'll burn out and get drained, and you've got to start learning to handle a lot more energy around you and getting sovereign around your own energy field. And so just lost my way in the question. You said, what do I think is going to happen? I think a lot of people are going to start businesses to work their light. I think the corporate world is so ready for spirituality. They really are. I think they're confused when they hear it, but they're ready for it. I've started to work with corporations, and I've been signed as a keynote speaker with a big keynote speaking agency in Australia, and I'd like to speak in the US and Canada. Because we're kind of over presentation skills and how do you manage your time. We're so evolved, our consciousness. People are hungry for, give me meaning after I've been through my dark night. I've lost my job. I'm going through death or divorce. Like, how do I thrive? How do I transition? How do I play a bigger game in the world? So I think a lot of people working their light are going to have doors open in the corporate world, and they're probably going to run little workshops, do little talks, and they're going to meet serve a lot more people, because we've got to really get real that a lot of people work in the corporate world. Like, most of the world works in corporate because we need people to generate a level of function in the world. Like that's just scientific economics. And so we need people that have had the awakening to assist those in the corporate world to how to navigate that system. I think there's going to be a real melding. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it's very true that especially when we're sensitive to our psychic gifts and claircognizant, I know that has been a blessing and a curse sometimes with our business because we could see where we want it to be and we think that the next step is getting there, but really we're just seeing the bigger vision. And like you said, taking those small steps is how you flex the muscle, is how you're able to continuously do your own inner work while you're doing that. So you build that strong auric field and you can handle your nervous system can handle everything that's about to come. So I love that piece. I think that's super key for our audience because a lot of them are healers to be or healers in the making. And I agree. I think it has to be both of bringing spirituality in the business setting that doesn't feel intimidating, but that inch of maybe not even calling it spirituality, but connecting in a way that feels really fruitful for the team. And Rachel and I talk about this a lot. I think it really starts with leadership and how that can also trickle down into the employees. So I'm curious, do you work with leaders and CEOs of businesses, or where do you find it's most fruitful to do your work when you're working in
something I love working with all groups, and quite often you have your awakening in your job and you wonder why. It now makes sense to me that I'm going back to corporates and doing traineeship on brave leadership. My book's called Brave. Brave leadership is about being vulnerable, being brave in your vulnerable, learning to be imperfect, learning to use your intuition, learning to talk about mediumship in the corporate context and be okay with who you are, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be mediumship. Just to honor yourself within a corporate context can actually be quite exciting, because people look at you and go, wow, Angelica, you're so interesting. You're amazing at marketing and you do this. You've got this amazing spiritual nature about you. Tell me more, right? So I feel like with my clients, I love working with my mentor program. I'm launching a subscription program later in the year with a lot more access to my content, but I'm also going to be doing lives, and I love doing the live psychic readings. I do them 8 o'clock every Tuesday morning, Sydney time. So I love doing the psychic work and I love doing spontaneous readings. I love running women's circles. I love running retreats. And also with the corporate world, I love kind of going into like a company and I love surprising people with something so refreshing and different, because they're like, wow, this is so different. So, some advice for women running their businesses, you're going to have to find different ways to make an income, to work your light, for the people that need you. So don't get too wedded to it looking a certain way. And I'm very lucky. I think my MBA and my corporate executive skills really translated into me running my own light worker business. I use a lot of the practices and principles. And, I have a 3-year strategy, which I did in corporate land when I was working for Simon & Schuster. It's a big company, big publishing house in the US. I worked for them. And then when I came to my business, I thought, what's my 3-year plan? So what's my budgets? What's my marketing strategy? Like I do use those tools because as light workers, we love our modality. Like we love our zone of genius and what we're good at and what's our purpose. And so you're going to have to spend some time, I find, I'm talking about running a business now, and I hope this helps your listenership, but we've got to find some time to do the stuff that we're not as good at or we don't like. And I've outsourced things that I don't feel like I want to do, so I can concentrate on client work, on my healing work, on my mentoring. And, we've got to play a long game. Like you guys have been doing this for a while. And, I really believe one of my good friends, Bella, she says success comes from not quitting. And she wrote a book years ago. And I said, how did it feel getting to the end? And she goes, I'm so glad I didn't quit. And when I wrote my book, Brave, and got it published, and it's coming out in French, it's being translated into French next month and published in France by Hachette. I look at like how many times I wanted to quit, because writing a book, I don't know if you guys have set out, is so much work. And it's so rewarding. And I think it's the biggest self-healing journey you can go on when you write a book, because you write the book for yourself. You write the one that you need to heal yourself, or that version of you 10 years ago needs. And that's why I think a soul tribe and a mentor around you is so important, because you're going to want to quit many times over. It's going to get hard. But remember, running a business is the biggest self-development program you can do.
Yeah.
So you signed up for self-development. We just don't realize that when
Who
we
knew?
start.
Did not know at all.
No, running this podcast, I bet you guys have learned a thing or two about yourself and each other and about your growth, you know, and as you listen to more people speak, their wisdom becomes your wisdom. So you're like, wow, I'm getting so many benefits, and the byproduct is that your light is shining in the world. So
Yeah.
that's the game.
And just to add to the corporate thing, I think, you know, the name of the game now is just that the innovation. And so we're in the information age, you can find anything. And so a real skill is being intuitive, because that's where the downloads and new insights, new ideas are going to come from. So the more that execs can hone in that skill and to learn to listen to their gut and to do things differently rather than just regurgitating things, then it's going to change the landscape of Fortune 500 companies as well, right? And in a good way. So not anything needs to be terrifying for them, but like, this is a good thing to have more innovation and creativity.
Mm.
And I kind of want to segue now and talk about the fun stuff. So we want to know like what mediumship looks like from the other side, behind the scenes. So what kind of light beings do you work with, spirit guides, or like, what is it like if you were to pull back the curtain, what's the experience like for you?
Oh gosh, I had the curtain pulled back in an ayahuasca ceremony. I asked to see the other side. So I feel like I actually have seen the other side. And in my work, I see the other side all day. There's different dimensions that we tap into. And when we tap into the dimension where our passed over relatives sit, it's actually quite a dense realm. It's lower frequency. And when I pull through the energy, it does feel heavier in my body. So when I wrote my book, Brave, I actually worked with 12 different spirit guide groups. And you can feel a group differently to an individual. You can feel a consciousness. It feels more expansive, like a cloud. You might just see it as light. So I've definitely worked with different light beings from different, different solar systems, different star systems, different star seeds. And what I teach is, we all have guides around us, spirit guides. We have a master guide that's working with us for our whole life. So my master guide has a strong energy and a very familiar energy in my field. So to all your listeners, you should know, and I don't want to use the word should, but I invite you to know who your master guide is. Because when you become a medium, and when I teach this in my awakening course, you need to be able to know when an energy isn't yours. And how do you know when an energy isn't yours? You know it because you know your own energy and you know your own spirit guide teams. And so that's how I work as a medium. Is if I was doing a reading for you, Rachel, or you, Angelica, I'd feel your energy and who's around you. And then Rachel, I'd say, I've got a male on your right side connected to your father or grandfather, right? And I feel like they moved around the country and were connected to agriculture. So I see an energy in my clairvoyant, in my third eye. Then I use my psychic line of questioning to go, who are they? And then you get trained as a psychic medium to go, right is always male, left is female, or it might be the reverse for you. And then I start to ask questions because they're around and I know they're not my spirit team, so I can feel they're yours. So with my own team, I have all sorts of guides I work with. I work with my writing guides to channel through, the White Brother, the Brotherhood of the Light, Merlin, Conrad, Mary Magdalene energy. I didn't actually write the names of the guides in the back of this book, but my publisher wants me to do another book, and I think I definitely will write the names of the guides in the back. So it's such an honoring of the energies I work with, and I channeled through what each guide did for the book. Like one was we're creating humor, the other is we're linking stories. I couldn't believe how detailed when I sat and spoke to the guides, what they were each telling me. So I worked with the guides to write the book. As a healer, I also work with protection guides. They're tickling my nose. I work with a protection guide to protect me from dark energies coming in, right? So I kind of line them up, or see them like the Game of Thrones. I'll actually have an army in front of me, and I'll say, you decide who is of the light, and only of the light can get through to me. So I work with those types of guides. When I'm ascending and I do more medicines or deepen my meditation practice, or want to lift my vibration to go into new spaces to bring through more spiritual knowledge, I'll tend to invite in newer high vibrational light guides, but you have to lift your vibration to bring in and work with high guides. So as you guys have lifted your vibration, you've worked with more and more light beings.
Totally.
Yeah. And which is exciting. And the more light beings you work with, that light beings tend to be around us to literally impart spiritual, esoteric, metaphysic knowledge. And you literally start to spontaneous know things. Or there'll be a book that you didn't want to read that you bought 5 years ago. You're like, I'm ready to read that book, because like the consciousness is ready to invite in the knowledge. So it's a sign when you start to get a new teacher, or you read new books, or you have a passion to study a new modality, that there's a new group of guides. So it tends to be a group working with you, and they're trying to lift you so that you can start to work in different ways. So and I teach this. I feel like you've got to be very curious when you're a psychic medium, working interdimensionally as a medium. You have to ask a lot of questions. Where are you from? How are you working with me? Why are you working with me? So every morning I have a practice. Well, not every morning, but quite often, like at least once or twice a week, I'll sit with my guides and I'll talk and I'll write answers from them. Right? So there's the guide you're working with, and also there's the psychic senses. How are you receiving it? So it's very good to do a course or study how you receive it clairvoyantly. Audient, I have very good audient. I hear. Just got activated at one point in time. Sentient and cognizance, very strong. I know there's a holiday around the corner from one of you guys. I can feel it. There's a holiday, there's a break that's needed, right? So you tune into the energy and you go, bang, it feels strong. It feels like, yes, right? And I teach you to hit your body. So you tend to feel it in your stomach or your heart, and claircognizance working, because if you go the opposite way and you say you're not going on a holiday, that feels wrong. Like you are, like that kind of energy. So when you tune into something, the way you test claircognizance, it's a bit like muscle testing. You say the opposite statement and you can feel the no in your body. So I've gone so off track, but I could talk about this till the cows come home. Many guides, many masters, and I work with obviously the clients' guides, and that's why I teach my students. You've got to understand how to connect with the clients, guides, and speaks to help the clients. There's so many people come to you for a reading, and they want to know who the guides are around them and who their ancestors are. And so as a medium, we've got to vibrationally, extend a heart cord out to hook into their sort of field, and then channel through the information coming from their aura and then the guides. So it's quite complex how we work, yet quite spontaneous at the same time. You're both nodding, like you guys obviously are mediums, you obviously channel, and you just know what it feels like spontaneously just to have this information come to you.
Yeah, it's so cool how you talk about it so intricately, but it happens all instantaneously, like all at the same time, like you're saying. But it really does take that delegation of understanding how the distinguishment between your own energy, your guides, that just helps you to evolve your experience with it all. I'm curious what kind of star systems you do. Is there like a certain star family you like to channel from, or do you kind of hop around?
I hop around, I think, because I've lived on so many different star systems. And I think in working, in writing, I think when you write a book, maybe do podcasts, you work with so many other light beings that you start to get familiar with their energy. So Palladians, Beta Centauri, Sirian, and then something, ladies, I feel like I'm channeling from star systems we don't have names for. So I feel like, and I'm excited, I'm hoping somebody writes a book in the next couple of years with all these new star systems.
Oh, cool.
And someone channels through, someone gets brave, read my book, Brave, get brave, and you're going to just download all of this information. It might come through a plant medicine ceremony, right? And then you might build on it after. That's what I get a sense. And because somebody had to once channel through Palladian energy and call it Palladian. Totally. Now it's so common, but there was one person that did it once first, and then it's opened us up now to all have a signature recognition of Palladian energy. So somebody needs to be brave enough to channel through. I feel like there's at least 10 more out there. I'm getting 10 that people don't know the names of, that we're all channeling from. Right. So, and I've been told by an Akashic reader years ago that I channel from a very far away star seed system that was demolished very early on in the intergalactic wars, and it was a pure love vibration. So I feel like I emanate just a lot of just pure love, and your listeners might might understand this. Sometimes I feel like being on Earth's really hard. I'm like, this is a tough dimension. It's tough. I feel like I'm a young Earth soul, but an old soul interdimensionally. And sometimes navigating Earth feels hard. And there might be evidence of that in your astrology, because you might be placed with a lot of water or a lot of challenging placements in your chart, where you came here to have a lot of human Earth experiences to grow. That's what I feel. But my esoteric and spiritual wisdom is quite advanced. Yet, you know, but my Earth experience at times can feel quite challenging. And that's kind of a sign of an older soul that is a teacher. So if there's any women or men listening to this and you're having that experience, my counsel is to figure out how you can bring through the esoteric knowledge from faraway star systems, but find an earthly business way to make it happen. Like, find a practical way so that you're not struggling to navigate human life. Does that make sense to you, ladies? Do you have that experience?
Yeah, definitely. And Jock, I'll let you answer that. I have a question that's burning, but wanted to make a note on.
Oh, yeah, no, you can go ahead. I agree with that.
well, mine's kind of going back, so I didn't want to take us off track, but I was fascinated by Master Guide, Master Teacher, because I'm curious if for most people that's like an ancestor, if that's a certain level of consciousness, or is it different for everyone? You just have someone who signed up to like live this life with you at a different dimension.
Yeah, you've signed up for someone to live, to follow you from conception through to death, and they're always from a higher vibration, right? That they're here to lift your vibration up. Then they're not an ancestor that you knew when you're alive, because they're with you from conception through to death. So they could be part of your ancestor team for sure. The big markers is they're here to help make sure that you fulfill your soul contract. And their soul contract is probably entwined with your soul contract. They've got a soul contract as well as you. You don't have, it's not just earthlings that have soul contracts. All consciousness have a level of contract for the soul for that experience. So your contracts might be similar. And as you learn on Earth, they're learning too. And the master guide, I feel like one of the hallmarks of the awakening process is to meet your master guide. And most of my students in the awakening program, when I interview them and chat to them before they come in, they all say, yes, I'm aware of guides. Like, I'm aware of them. I don't know who they are, or I think there are guides. I just wish I knew who they were. So it's one of those kind of first steps after you've had the big awakening, this feeling of, I want to connect with my guide, and then it can be quite emotional when you connect with your master guide, because there is this recognition of their energy, because they've been around you since you were born, like since your birth, right? Since conception. So there's a feeling of you've known their energy the whole way along. And there's also a feeling, I find, of not feeling alone anymore. You're like, oh, I'm not alone. I've got people in the world, right? Because by then you might have had trauma, and quite often psychic mediums most commonly have trauma. I've yet to see a case. I've yet to see a student not have some level of pretty significant hardship as a child, more than average. It's one of the hallmarks of the awakening process, that the soul can handle more as a child, and it does connect your soul to deeper wisdom earlier on, right? You can have an awakening later, a death. I know of people who have had death of their partners, their true soulmate, early in life. That's another hallmark, death of parents early. These are things that awaken you to the other side, because you're yearning to know. So yeah, the master guide's with you the whole way. It's just about connecting and channeling from them. Are you guys connected to your guide? Obviously you are connected to your master guides. And
well, that's interesting you say master guide, because I know I have a guide that's very strong for me, that is with me for a lot, and I've been in for a lot of lifetimes, but I never specifically said master guide. So I'm curious to kind of dive into that more. How about you, Rach?
Yeah, I feel like the biggest guide for me is my grandpa, which is why I thought it was interesting that you said they've been there since conception. He died when I was really little, 1.5 years, but it must not be him. So it's interesting. I just kind of put that energy to him, but perhaps it's another form. So I'm curious to dive into this deeper after this conversation, because now my interest is piqued. I'm like, well, who is it?
Well, let me help you as well with that, because I have my master guide, but my ancestors, my grandparents who died after I was born, they're around me a lot, and I work with them a lot. So your master guide might actually step back, big, strong energy, and just to let the guides that you want to work with, the frequency you understand and know to step forward. So it's like being a CEO, right? And then you let the team around you. So you're obviously very familiar with your grandfather's energy. It feels really knowing. So that guide, they're working together. So quite often I'll have a master guide step in with an ancestor, right? So you don't have to use your ancestor guide. They're working with you. They're kind of the knowing. And then when you've awakened, you're like, oh, how do I work with you? Right. So that's kind of how I would explain guides. We're more in charge than we realize. And Angelica, I guess to share with you, if you're going through massive spiritual growth, you'll constantly have new guides step in and out. So the master guide steps back, and then you might work with new guides that feel more stronger. So the master's always there, but you'll be working with new guides. And so sometimes I'm more focused on the new guides than I am the master guide.
Totally.
And that might feel stronger in that moment. The master's still there. They just step back. Sometimes I feel them just step back. They don't go though.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think it's really interesting that you bring up trauma and how that really is the awakening for a lot of empaths, because they need to attune to that frequency of sensitivity and being able to connect with the unseen world. And I'm curious, do you really see that trauma sometimes is not by accident, is that's karmic, so that they can almost instigate their process and becoming an empath and becoming more sensitive to others' energies? Or do you feel like sometimes people fall into that trauma, but that's not necessarily the next phase of the life that they're going to go into?
I feel like there's a lot of dharma and destiny at play in our lives, and there's a lot of free will as well. So free will is where our soul lessons and growth happen. And the dharma and karma is the universe's way of assisting us through those points. So I feel like a lot of that's why I say lean into your astrology, your numerology, your human design, if you're open to that. I love astrology. I'm a purist. So in my chart, there was a lot of trauma and challenges in my childhood before in my first 20 years. And on some level, I think, well, I couldn't really run from that. That was, what I had to go through. And then in my chart, it said from 40 onwards, things would become a lot easier, and they have. And on some ways, that's with a flourishing with the gifts. So the gift is in the wound, right? So I feel like we're here and we're meant to make sense of the trauma, and, we'll lean into the healing until we've got to a certain level of healing where our cup's so full we can start now giving out. But I do say this to my students: the healing's eternal. Like I'm constantly going through more and more evolution. It never stops. You don't ever arrive at a final point. It's constant evolution. And that's why you need to have teachers that are kind of growing, that you can grow with as well. Because the psychic is one level of consciousness that's definitely, it's high vibration and high consciousness, because you start to get a sense of there's energies around us and there's something invisible we can't see. But the highest state now, and I teach this through my mentor program, is the being and who we are. That drives our co-creation versus a psychic and a medium telling us. And I love this work as a psychic medium because I can read the auric field and the dharma lines that you created based on your thoughts and impressions up till now. So someone could read my auric field and tell me what the next 3 months, 6 months hold. But if I work as a co-creator and change my state, thoughts, and my visualizations, I can change my destiny where there is free will in operation. If things are meant to happen and my soul has asked for lessons in that we can't run from, right? But that's not to be feared. We have gratitude for that. Because when I've gone through really challenging times in my life, I look back and I go, wow, look at the vastness of my soul that I could handle that. So if anyone is going through big trauma, I would love you to take on the mantra for yourself, to say to yourself, wow, look at the vastness of my soul that I knew I could that I chose, that I could handle that. Because that's where we want to go as soulful spiritual women and men, that we can recognize our vastness, even if our life is a bit messy because of the trauma we've been through.
Yeah. And as you say this, I kind of had an aha where I think the older the soul, like we come here to experience things and learn lessons, and the older your soul, the more they want to experience. And so it kind of reminds me of like the darker the night, then the brighter the sun. And so we experience that trauma so that we can come over here to the other end of the spectrum and feel that light, be that light worker, experience that joy. So I think that's really beautiful. And I also want to ask about the evolution of your soul once you are on the other side. So, are you evolving because you're helping humans, or are you evolving because of things that are happening on like astral plane, or like what's happening as far as evolution once you are no longer in a body?
I think it's all of that. I think Rachel, I think you're saying what you're speaking to is the truth. I think you might have a soul contract to come and help other earthlings awaken and other people in your soul group, right? There's soul contracts within the group, and you guys are obviously in a group together. You know who your group is because they feel very family, familiar, on path together. So you might have a contract to come back and do that. Your soul might want to go off and learn more, have more experiences interdimensionally. We're fractals of light. So on some level, we're always returning back to source energy. And within that, there's just I feel like we're constantly having these experiences to remember we're divine. So we're choosing something where we forget we're divine to remember. And there's some level of polarity that we're always meant to experience, like that unawake to the awake. We come in, I mean, you guys think about your lives, how lack of divinity was there at a point? How disconnected were you from source? How angry were you with the universe? How like crap was life? And then you'll be awakening, and even though life's hard, you are now like, I'm divine, I'm connected to source. So I think that's our part, to constantly remember that we're divine and connected to source. And even once you're awake and aware to that, I have moments, I don't forget it, but I have moments where I feel disconnected, right? And my job, and I teach, whatever I teach, I do myself. That's the way the teachers, you guys get this. When people say they want to become a coach or a mentor or a spiritual teacher, I say, really? Are you sure? Because you are going to be held to so much integrity in your own life. Whatever you teach, you have to live it. There is no room for a lack of integrity. So when I feel disconnected from source, I have to come back to my own principles and practices. Connecting to the ocean, I've manifested living a 3-minute walk from a beach in Sydney, which it's a bit like living on a beach in somewhere in America where it's really hard to, like Malibu maybe. And I manifested it. And so, most days I will connect to the ocean. It's my spiritual practice. And when I forget it, I pay a price, so yeah.
Yeah, we love connecting with the elements as well. I feel like, we're Ayurvedic practitioners, so that is just in our blood, in our soul. I am curious, do you find that the working with the elements has its own type of energy, and how does this energy feel different for you versus channeling light beings?
Yeah, when you're working with the energy of Mother Earth, the ocean, the elements, you're essentially going back to, I feel like, the oneness vibration. And there is a restoration, a restorative and a healing that happens. And if you're in the corporate world and we're all in houses and rooms, right, doing this work, not in a natural state, I feel like there's a healing that happens. And then once I connect back to the elements, the channeling of light beings is much easier, because when we channel, the crown opens, right? The crown is the vessel. Like, think of a colander on your head. It's a channel, like, to bring in the wisdom. And you need deep roots. The deeper the roots, the bigger the crown. So unless you're connected to earth to anchor in that energy flowing through your body, you'll feel overwhelmed. Like, you feel, I get psychic overwhelmed sometimes. I'm like, especially when I do a lot of readings, when I do my lives, straight after, I'll think, I'll actually feel a little bit like not like a little bit like I can feel the crowns opened. I'll feel that expansion. And later today, I'll definitely have a swim in the ocean just to connect and bring my body back to earth. So to answer your question, Angelica, I think they're complementary. Complementary. If you sit all day and channel light beings, you will feel just too spacey. And at some point you feel overwhelmed with spiritual information that you'll yearn for earth and barefoot walking and sleeping on the ground and just being outdoors in the air. Like, you'll just yearn for that. Your body will know.
Definitely. I'm curious, have you been seeing any patterns or similarities in certain channel messages that you've been having recently with clients?
I feel that, yes, and I got this when COVID first started. I said to the angels, the universe, speaking to my guys, I said, what's going to happen on the end of this? And they said, miracles, miracles, miracles. That was 2 years ago, right? So we're seeing miracles, and we weren't for 2 years. And I feel like the consistent message is that there's a lot more awakening happening, and a lot more people are ready to step into their soul work. Like there's this absolute undeniable feeling within people's bodies. I feel like people are now, what I'm seeing in readings is people are now realizing that they're co-creating their reality. From 10 years ago, there was a lot of, where is my life going? What am I doing? Where people are now coming to me with, how do I change my mindset? Which is not something people did 10 years ago. They wanted the answers. And when will I meet him? Where do I need to stand to meet the guy? It's like that bus stop. That was kind of the flavor of the readings. The consciousness of the planet's lifted. So where the kind of readings I do now, and we read, I guess, to our own vibrations. So you attract clients that are ready for these type of readings. So people are asking me more about, how do I connect with my guides? So I'm getting more readings around spirituality as well. And I always find the first part of the year, it's always a flavor of, what's my purpose? Where am I going? Am I on track with my own vision? So they're kind of the readings that I get. How about you guys? What are you noticing?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like last year, a huge thing we were talking about is everyone's unique gifts coming online. And I think it was more so on the like recognizing how authentic each of us is and what each of us is really good at. And of course, that's like the positive side of it. But I think the shadow side of it was actually doing all the work to release all the ways that we believe that we're not confident in our gifts. And so for us, it felt like a big clearing as well. And, for this year, what I really see that is like that coming into action. And again, we use astrology as well, more so Vedic astrology. So in April, when we see a lot of these planets changing, and finally Saturn getting a break out of Capricorn energy and going into Aquarius, is seeing that a lot of healers and light workers are going to be able to actually bring their offerings to life and speak their truth more, and bring their confidence, now that they kind of harness and recognize those gifts within them, that they'll be able to put them into action.
Yeah, absolutely. The Capricorn is that truth serum, right? It's the work. It's the anything that's stubborn needs to come up. And I love what you said there, Angelica. I feel like I've done a lot of readings where people are really scared of their gifts. Yes. And I feel like, there's that psychic knowing of how powerful we are. Yeah. And I remember I had a reading in 2014, and one of my early spiritual mentors said, you're going to write a book. A lot of people are going to read it. You're going to help a lot of women speak to large groups. And I was like, what? Like overwhelmed. Because I was in my corporate job. I had no idea what she was talking about. And I said, what am I going to write about? She said, you're going to write about what you're about to do. And I said, what am I about to do? Right. So it's just like rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And I feel like, that's why having a mentor or a spiritual teacher or leaning into your astrology is essential, because it's like you're navigating the boat fundamentally yourself. That's the free will at play. That's where the soul growth is. We can't abstain our responsibility or give it away to other people to tell us the kind of healers we are. Like we can do that for a while while you're learning to swim, but after a while, the teacher will say, how do you want to work? Who do you want to work with? Why are you doing this? And you have to work on getting yourself ready that you can answer those questions, because no one could say to me, Sheila, you're going to be a corporate speaker and help people at spirituality. Like that had to bubble up from within me, and I had to get there in my own timing. I think we're in a rush as well. When you see everyone else with their new websites and their Instagram lives, don't compare yourself to them. Like just literally do what you do. In my heart, I'm looking at my work and my visioning for 15 years ahead. I'm like, well, what do I do in the next 15 years? I mean, I've always been able to think long term. And my first career lasted 20 years. Like I left the corporate world as a director. And so I guess my counselors have a bit more long-term thinking. You'll go further. Yeah. You'll go further and your reach will be deeper because you won't get as lost. That's one important counsel I give to women starting out.
I want to go back to something you said, because I think a big trend in recent years is us giving away our agency or our power. And like you said, just hoping that somebody else will give us the answer or tell us the thing. And I think a big thing when you are connecting with your guides, especially the way that you're describing it, is we have so much personal power and we're really leading the conversation. It's our level of consciousness and our thinking that determines what can even come in. And so, what would you share with people who are scared to do that, maybe even scared of their own knowledge, or maybe scared that there are energies or guides at play that might not have their highest interest, and what can they do in those situations?
Okay, so the first thing I always say is work with a teacher early on. So I had like 4 or 5 teachers early on, because I was just so desperate to channel anything through, and I did, right? So I had to get a bit more sovereign with what were the energies and what were the vibrations, and sometimes you have to learn the hard way, right? You get a teacher that can hold space and keep you in a container where you feel like they've gridded it and they're holding you in a space where you can open your channel, right? So that's a good spiritual teacher, can do that for you. If you're wanting to work a bit more independently from a teacher, you need to make sure that you're using invocations and that you're only channeling light beings of the light, of the light, of the light, 3 times we say it, of the light. And just know that because human school here, we are here to learn unconditional love and connection to divinity. That's what we're here to learn. And self-love is connected to source. Anything opposite that is a lesson. So when you move into fear, you will attract dark energies. And your job is to change a state into gratitude, compassion, empathy. And just changing your state is the highest protection I've found. Nothing touches me when I'm sovereign, filled with so much self-love and self-knowing. And if you feel like there's some darkness around you, or you feel like there's an energy and you're like, that's not mine, lean into a healer to get a clearing. You'll need to get clearings. And we don't speak about this. As you go on your path, the teacher will say to you, you need a healing, you need a clearing. And then you might go to someone that knows how to do that. And then you'll learn. It's an iterative learning process where I'll feel that's not my energy and I'll go to a healer, or now I catch it early and I keep my state really high. So your job is to keep your state high. And the other things we need to look at is you need to look at neurotransmitters. This is where spirituality meets science. You've got to look at neurotransmitters in your brain: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, hugs, exercise, play, laughter. These are vibrational states that assist your spiritual state. They're not separate. So a lot of spiritual people have their awakening and meditate and get super spiritual, but don't ever get too spiritual, that your state is impacted on earth. Definitely. Your state is your vibration, and your vibration is one of the markers of how and who you connect to. And if you're low state, you're not going to connect to much that's high, right? And that's why we open as a medium later in life. You've had to clear out all the negative thoughts before you can open as a medium. So when people have a spiritual awakening, it tells me that they've done some work. They've done some work, that their vibrations lifted, that they can now connect to their guides on a conscious level. That's how I know they've done some work. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like every reading I've ever had, people tell me I need to play, and I can be so serious, but it's just such a funny thing. It's like getting that state. And it's something that at the beginning of this journey, I would have never thought was a part of this. Like, I would have thought it took a lot of discipline and commitment to connect and to keep that higher vibration, but it is such a key component and something we don't talk about, because it doesn't really match the way we, culturally define success, which is the hustle. And we try to apply our method of success to spirituality, and it doesn't work. Like you said, there's still something that keeps us down and keeps us denser and heavier, unless we figure out how to activate those higher vibrations through things like play and laughter. So I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this has been such a fun conversation, Sheila. And I'm looking at our questions and I'm laughing because we didn't ask hardly any of them. We got way too excited, but these were better. And this was all perfect. So tell us where we can find your book, work with you, any of the things that you're up to. We would love to hear all of it.
Yeah. So my book's Brave, Courageously Live Your Truth. You can get it on Amazon, buy it in the Kindle edition. it's beautiful in pinks. I think people are enjoying owning
Yeah, I
it.
love the color.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, my publisher did a great job. So it's you know, it's a path. I call it the courageous path. It takes you, it's a path that helps you navigate your spiritual awakening so you can work your light, work as a soul worker, right? So it's a pathway program, and there's questions and reflections at the back of each chapter. You can reach out to me on sheilav.co if you want to get a reading with me. I have a mentor program, and I run my course Awakening Intuition 2-3 times a year. So we're starting our next one this Thursday, so I'm not sure if the listeners can jump on this one, but maybe the next program. It's a 10-week foundational course to support you in your awakening. And, you know, much like you ladies, I just love supporting people at that part of the path just to help them. It's my soul work, much like yours.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show, and everyone, we will see you next week. Thanks.